أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Jazakallah khair to the Hounslow the Islamic Inspire Circle and Halaqah for organizing this session. Inshallah, this is a series that we want to have on the surah, which should be a surah that we at least listen to or read the first 10 verses of, which is Surah Al-Khaf, surah number 18. So inshallah, we're going to go through a journey of this surah, through this surah, just going over some of the key lessons that we can get from this surah. Today, we're going to focus on the companions of the cave. Who were the companions of the cave? Why did they enter the cave? Why did they stay in the cave? What happened? These are some of the questions that we will try to answer through this session, inshallah. But before we start, it's really important that we understand the context of the revelation of this particular surah and where it falls into the Islamic paradigm or the Islamic framework that we follow. So if we now, inshallah, try to look at this particular surah, and first thing we have to ask ourselves is, when was the surah revealed? And as we know, when we're studying the Quran, that the Quranic revelation started from Surah Al-Alaq, some of the few first verses of Surah Al-Alaq, with Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. This was revealed in Mecca. And this is why you have the idea of the Makki surah and the Madani surah, which were the surahs or the verses that were revealed in Medina. So you have those surahs that were revealed in the earliest part of the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and those that were revealed later. Surah Al-Kahf, surah number 18 that we're covering, is one of the earliest surahs that were revealed. And many of the scholars, what they have said is that this particular surah, this particular chapter of the 114 chapters that we have in the Quran, it sums up the main gist of Islam, the main message of Islam. So it's a very important surah, because if you really want to understand Islam better, and you want to perhaps have a summarized version of the key messages of Islam, then this is a very good surah to go into. So our first key 2 points to make and to be aware of, and because having this understanding really helps us to have a better understanding of surah. So when you discover that a surah was revealed in the earlier part of the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know that we're in Mecca. We know that it is not a community that's been well established. We're talking about early Muslims. We're talking about the Muslims who were struggling and being persecuted and so on. So that gives you an understanding of the context in which it was revealed. And the second key point to keep in mind is that why is it that this surah is supposed to summarize the main gist of Islam? What are those key messages that we want to get, inshallah? One of the key things, again, to keep in mind when you are learning and studying the Quran is that whenever you come across a story, is that the stories are not fully complete. You don't get it's not like a novel. It's not like Harry Potter or Chronicles of Narnia, where you have a beginning and there are characters that are revealed, and then there is setting and there is build up of events, and then there is the end. There is no such thing in the stories. Perhaps the one that comes closest to something like that is Surah Yusuf, which is the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. But even then, there are bits that you might call missing, or things that are not revealed, because that is not the style of the Quran. Because the Quran reveals certain things for a purpose. Because it is, whilst a book containing stories, it is not a book which is a story book. So stories are there for a purpose, and we have to understand in this context, inshallah. So what are the four main stories? And this inshallah, over the next year, whenever I come and meet you in Hounslow, hopefully we can do this in person like we normally do, inshallah. I would like to go through one at a time. And so tonight we're going through one of the four main stories. But let's try to understand what are those four main stories. The first story is about the young men who hide in a cave to worship one God. So this is something we're going to go into a little bit more detail. The second one is the story of the two gardens, the fitna of the mal, which is to do with property and wealth and how to overcome this. So the story of the two gardens will be, inshallah, in the future session. The story of Musa and Khidr, which is to do with knowledge that can be misused. And then story of Dhul Qarnayn, which is the story of power and having leadership. So if you think about it, each of those stories are testing a group of people or a person, one or two things that are important to all of us. We are tested with faith. So therefore, this is why one of the things that is said about this surah is that we should recite it and remember it every Friday. And so it is a reminder to us how people of faith were tested before us of their faith. The second is that we will be tested with our property, with our wealth, with our money. And so therefore, the second story teaches us something related to that. And the third one is the idea of having knowledge, having access to knowledge, and how that can be used, misused, and of course, how in this story it is being how knowledge is being is used as a way to teach. And the third one is, of course, power. And again, at our own level, in our homes, to our communities, to a state level, to a world global level, we have the use and misuse of power. So if you think about it, each of those four stories deal with something to do with our own lives, something to do with society, something to do with people. And so therefore, it's a very good reminder, inshallah. So if you look at this, whoever recites on Friday will give you, this is a little bit of a quiz. Those of you who are sitting at home and watching and listening to this, whoever recites on Friday will give you a what? So I want you to think about this until next Friday. This is a hadith mentioned in Al-Hakim. So whoever recites on Friday will give you a something until next Friday. I wonder if you have any idea. The second one is the person who recites properly with tajweed will be protected from something overpowering him. Again, a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, inshallah, I will reveal to you the blessings of this. So whoever recites on Friday will give you a light until next Friday. So the word is light. And of course, this is to do with light, a spiritual light that you will receive through recitation of this particular surah. And the second hadith is the person who recites properly with tajweed will be protected from Dajjal overpowering him. On another session, and you may want to go into what Dajjal is and so on, but it's something that we seek protection from. And so therefore, Surah Al-Khaf is seen as a way to seek that protection. But notice, it's not just a case of reciting, but reciting with proper tajweed. And this is why, again, learning tajweed and understanding becomes really important. So these are, and there are many other hadith on these. These are some key blessings of this particular surah. So when was it revealed? So the first thing that we want to learn was time of the revelations. This was a time Muslims were being persecuted in Mecca. They were treated really badly. The Quraysh of Mecca tried to find different ploys to discredit or make Islam look bad. And they asked, one of the things that they did was they asked Christians and Jews to help them with some questions so the Prophet would get stuck, basically. What is the story of the young man was the first question. And what is the story of the king whom Allah blessed, which is Dhul Qarnayn? And the third question is, what is Ruh? What is Ruh? So the Quraysh, they tried to find from the Christians and Jews who had access to the books, let's come up with some questions that we would go and ask the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he would not be able to answer. And so those were the three questions. Of course, Surah Al-Kahf, this particular surah, answers the first two questions. What is the story of the young man? The second, what is the story of the king whom Allah blessed? As we know, this was the fourth surah, a fourth story in this surah. And the first story is the story of the young men. So the first two questions were answered in this surah after this question was asked. And the third is what is ruh? And this, as actually in the following surah, it begins with that. So all of these questions were actually asked. Not only that, as we will find out as we go along, and when you study in depth of this surah, is that actually they got a lot more than that. And so therefore, their ploy in this case did not work. So the first part of this is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi alladhi anzala ala abdihi al-kitaba wa lam yaj'al lahu 'iwaja qayyiman liyundhira ba'san shadidan min ladunhu wa yubashshira al-mu'minin ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا. So these are the first two verses that we learn in this surah, which is surah number 18. Alhamdulillahi alladhi anzala ala abdihi al-kitaba walam yaj'al lahu 'iwaja قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا. So all praise is due to Allah, Alhamdulillah, who revealed the book to his servant. أنزل على عبده الكتاب, that Allah has revealed, is the one who has revealed this book to his servant, and did not make it any crookedness. So in other words, it is a perfect book. قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا. Rightly directing that he might give warning of severe punishment from him and give good news to the believers who do good, that they shall have a goodly reward. So this begins our not only story, but actually it's affirming the importance of the revelation, that this is a surah. Allah is praising, Allah is, all praise is due to Allah, and he's revealed the book. And don't think this is a book that is not clear. Don't think this is a book which is of crookedness, but actually it's a very clear book. It's a book of guidance. And so therefore, that's the first thing that we learn from this, and that the fact that it is giving the glad tidings and of course of punishment. So the time of revelation, again, one of the things that again we go back to is the idea of the Kahf, which we will come back to in more detail, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So in the time of the companions of the cave that we will go into in more detail, what we learn is that the people had forgotten to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and had started worshipping statues instead. So there was some message in the past, and there are some people who obviously had that message, but people have forgotten. But there were some young men who still had Iman, belief in Allah in their hearts. These men were not very happy. And only Allah is Khaliq, the creator of the heavens and the earth. This is something that they believed in. So one by one, they left the way of disbelief and went and sat under a tree. So this is one of the understanding that we have. So before we go into that, one of the first few verses are really, really important about speaking falsely of Allah, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is challenging those who make false accusations about Allah, that don't come and say, if you go back, and this is not the purpose of this session, is not going to verse by verse explaining what is. I want you to go and explore verses 4 to 8 before you go into Surah Al-Khaf itself. Explore what are the key things that is mentioned about the verses 4 to 8. What is the verse 4, 5, and 5 saying? What is 6 and 7 saying? What is 8 saying? It's not something that I will go into in detail today. So the title of this surah is, let's try and bring this jigsaw together. The title is Surah Al-Khaf. Al-Khaf means the cave, a cave. So this is something that I want to come back to, which is uh, a kahf is a large cave. A ghar is a narrow and small cave. For example, you might have heard of a ghar, which is the one that you find in Mecca, for example. Okay, so it's a smaller cave, whereas a large cave is a kahf. Okay, a large cave is a kahf. And one of the key words that is mentioned is ar-raqim. Now, there are some difference of opinion on Raqim, a name and place where it took place is one, which could be in Aqaba in Palestine. Some people say it is the epitaph placed in the cave as a monument. And one of the scholars, Abul Kalam Azad, he says second view and may have been Petra, which is in Jordan. There are differences of opinion on this. Uh, for us, what's really important to keep in mind is that the Al-Kahf, the name that is being given, is the title is to do with this particular part of the surah. Not all of the surah is necessarily about the cave. Time and place of revelation, as I said, the earliest time when the Muslims were being persecuted. And the surah, now question that what one might ask is, why was the surah revealed? Now, if you think about it, what is the message that the early Muslims getting during this time? And one of the key things when you are being persecuted, when you're going through difficult times, you need hope. You need some way to know that things are going to be okay. And so the early Muslims, when they were going through these difficulties, they were asking these questions as well. Are things going to be okay? When will the help of Allah come? How are we going to get out of this? And so therefore, when you get a story like this, Surah Yusuf was revealed at a very similar time as well, because this was all about giving that hope and knowing that people in the past have gone through those difficult times. And one of the things that's been said during this lockdown period all over the world, and specifically if we look at our situation in UK, one of the surahs that have been reminded by various imams during this period is think about the people of the cave, the companions of the cave, how they were in their own kind of lockdown where they were not able to obviously not in the extreme case that they have been, that we've experienced. We were able to go and line up and queue for shopping and being able to see others, and it's not exactly a cave living in your own homes. But what key message that has been reminded is the idea of being in a seclusion and being away from or apart from society as a whole. So the title, I hopefully, inshallah, is very clear to you all. The time and place of revelation, the context in which it was revealed, why the surah was revealed, and the four key stories that you get from this surah. And these are, inshallah, these jigsaws together will help us to understand the surah even better. So just to give you another idea of the difference between a kahf, a large cave, and a ghar, which is a narrow and small cave, to understand better, inshallah. Now, as I mentioned, Raqim, it could be the epitaph which was placed at the cave, or it could be the name of the place where it happened. Okay. Now, there are several places which claim to be the place where the actual cave is. This could be the name of the place where it happened, now Amman, on the way to the Dead Sea. Those of you who have been to Jordan, Amman, as you go to just out of Amman and towards the Dead Sea, you'll be passing by this place. This could possibly be the Raqim. Now here I need to mention one thing. It happened many, many years ago. You're talking about centuries ago. And so therefore, to assume that we would have clear knowledge of the actual place is a very difficult one. And historians would delve into this, and they would have various opinions on this. One opinion is this place, and there is another opinion that actually this is a place in Turkey. So it could be either one of those places, possibly any others. Those two places I've come across. And the key point, even the surah itself will go on to make, is that it doesn't really matter where it happened. It has very little significance other than a maybe of historical interest. But as far as Muslims are concerned, It has very little relevance to our lives. It has no significance as far as worship is concerned, or the way we live our life. It could be a passing interest only. Where could it be? You could ask. And there's a couple of answers that's been given. This place in Jordan, and the other place which is in Turkey. But what's really important is, why were they there in the first place? What can we learn from their time there? And how significant is that? How relevant is that for us today? So again, question that might come: is it possible for a group to remain asleep for 300 years? And of course, part of our belief is belief in the unseen, belief in things that are supernatural, you might argue, or things that are not ordinarily understood. And of course, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bring us to life, and for us to die, and then to return again, it is possible for Allah to send a group of people to sleep for a long period of time, and for them to rise again. This is one of the miraculous nature of the event that took place. So again, one question that we might ask ourselves is, they were full of iman. This is one of the key characteristics of these people. How do you boost your iman? What kinds of things do you do? Here, I made a list with my family here. I called it my family list. Some of the 5 things that perhaps you could do. Read the Quran, okay, obviously. Do the adhkar every morning and evening, fasting whenever you can, other than the month of Ramadan, praying together and listening to talks. These are some of the ways that you can boost your iman. Because one of the key lessons that we learn about these companions of the cave is that they were men of iman, men of faith, because they were willing to give up and sacrifice everything they had in order for them to safeguard their iman, safeguard their faith. And so therefore, iman is not something that you just get. Iman is something that you develop. Iman is something that you in a sense give a booster to whenever, whatever way that is available for us, especially from the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the basic summary of what happened is that you have this youth in the cave. They made the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they slept, and then they awoke. So this is the basic scenario that we find ourselves in. So inshallah, what's really, really important that we especially look at the first verses that you get of Surah Al-Khaf, and try to understand. Now, who were the youth? They were young men, possibly in their 20s. Again, the age is not mentioned in the surah. It's the scholars, that mufassirun, they glean from various sources that they could be young men in their 20s. So what happened was, as you know, they were men of faith. The king heard about them and questioned them about their faith. So the king at the time was not a believing king. So he wanted idolatry and the worship, and to be other than the one God. And so he called them, and he questioned them about their faith. They asked the king and the people to believe in the oneness of Allah. So one of the key things that you get from that is that they used this as an opportunity to explain to the king their faith and their understanding of their faith. And the king was enraged. Naturally, the king did not want another. You got to understand, we perhaps are very fortunate to be living in multicultural, pluralist societies where you have people of different faith who are allowed. In those days, in fact, you could argue not very long ago, and Europe still struggles with having to live with Muslims in particular and other faiths. So it's still this notion of we only want people of our own faith to live in our country is something that's still relevant today, unfortunately. So you have the king really not wanting this group of people who believed in one God. And so whilst they were in punishment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped the young men to escape. So they were able to escape and find a refuge. And so So what did they do when they went in? So this is another lesson that we can learn when they went into the cave. The first act is, let's do something about this. And this is here I want to mention what's really important. They are not people just out of faith. They just said, go and do anything you like with us. We're happy for you to just kill us. Okay. No, they were not. They acted. They did. They took precautions to safeguard themselves, to save themselves from this tyrant king. The second thing they on the one hand they were reliant on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the other hand they were acting and making sure, and they made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they made dua to Allah, our Lord, ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. I would advise you to learn this dua. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. Our Lord, grant us from yourself mercy and prepare for us from our affair right guidance. So one, they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for mercy, and they are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to prepare them for right guidance. So even at that moment in time, they were very much conscious of being rightly guided. Min ladunka rahma is one, mercy. وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا, and make our affairs for us on guidance. So again, if you look at these verses, so they actually go to sleep. Through his mercy, Allah caused the young men and their dogs to fall asleep for years and years. Okay, so Allah made them turn to the right and to the left in their sleep. So going to this in a little bit more detail, you will actually see that when they were turning, whenever they were turning, they were actually turning away from the sun, and they were turning towards shade. And so that kind of thing was actually taken into account. If you had gone into the cave, you would have thought they were awake. And this is, again, how they were asleep. So they were not actually dead. So let's summarize again. From verses 14 to 18, the youth spoke to the king. They asked him for evidence of their belief. They leave knowing they're in trouble and can't get the king on their side. And they go to the cave. So that's the key thing that happened. Now, when they are awoken, وَكَذَلِكَ بَعَثْنَاهُمْ لِيَتَسَاءَلُوا بَيْنَهُمْ قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْكُمْ كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ قَالُوا لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ. And similarly, we awakened them, what they might question, that they might question one another. Said a speaker from among them. So one of them said, كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ, how long have you remained here? So you've woken up and you kind of realize, how long have I slept here? They said, لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ, we have remained a day or part of a day. قالوا, they said, ربكم أعلم بما لبثتم فبعثوا أحدكم بورقكم هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه وليتلطف ولا يشعرن بكم أحدا. Your Lord, they said, your Lord is most knowing of how long you remained. So send one of you with this silver coin of yours to the city, and let him look to which is the best of food, and bring you provision from it, and let him be cautious, and let no one be aware of you. So after they had this discussion about how long have we slept, one of them, or some of them, couple of them, it's not very clear, it's qalu, so maybe a couple of them, they said, look, let's not discuss how long have we been here. It could be a day, it could be half a day, whatever it is. I think they're kind of thinking, we need some food. Okay, so we have some silver coin left from the time we went to sleep, and let him look to which is the best food. Now this is really, really important here as well. Ayyuha azka ta'aman. They're concerned about food that is good for them, and bring you provision from it and let him be cautious. But again, be cautious because the king is there. The soldiers must be still looking. So let no one be aware of what is actually happening. So this is when they awoke from sleep. This is what they plan to do. Now, what does this say about the youth? What does this say about the youth? Uh, they're looking. If you eat halal, you care about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the key things we can get, a real sign of taqwa. So monitor where our money comes from. We show how we are conscious. Trapped, but they still care about eating halal, displaying their iman. So that's also has a relationship with dua that they're asking for as well. So again, they showed their iman by fleeing to the cave and having tawakkul in trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you look at the Battle of Uhud, for example, the Prophet ﷺ had 2 suits of armor, double layer of protection. And that's something that we've got to keep in mind, that tawakkul is about protecting ourselves and making sure that we are taking all precautions and at the same time having reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like these examples here. So when they go to the market, the man got to the market but couldn't recognize it because it had changed so much. So obviously, if you've been asleep for 300 years, if you think about just in the last few years, how many times our coins, our notes, even the 20-pound note that you use in your own lifetime, if you go now, people will not accept, or 5-pound note, we will have to go to the bank and get it changed. So if it's been that long, so his money was very strange to them. The shopkeeper took the man to his king. Some people say to somebody of authority. And so therefore they got to find out that actually it was indeed because they've heard about this group of people who fled, and they realized it was these people. So indeed, if they come to know of you, they will stone you or return you to their religion, and never would you succeed. This was the fear that they had. And so therefore, one of the key things that we learn, Sharia's goal is to protect and promote basic human rights. And one of the key things, of course, there are 5 in particular: faith, life, family, property, and intellect. But faith comes across as a key thing to protect. And this is exactly what they were doing. Now, what happened was when they became known, what happened was that we caused them to be found. وَكَذَلِكَ أَعْثَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ. Would know, we caused them to be found, that they who found them would know that the promise of Allah is truth, and that the hour is there, hour there is no doubt. That was when they disputed. So they disputed among themselves about their affair, and they said, and some people said, construct over them a structure. Their Lord is most knowing about them. Said those who prevailed in the matter, we will surely take for ourselves over them a masjid. So they created a masjid, which was not a requirement, but that's something that they created in order to remember them. Again, I wanted to come back to, again, here lies the 7 sleepers is mentioned there. This is a place called Ephesus in Turkey, which was discovered in 1925. Another example of a place where it could be the place. So again, I want to just come back to what are the key things that we've learned from this then? What will you do or think from this? And to summarize, no matter what, we must worship Allah al-Khaliq. That's one of the key things. Whatever comes our way, if you look at what happened to Spanish Muslims who had to flee from the Christian takeover, reconquista or reconquest of Andalus. A lot of Muslims remained Muslims, but some Muslims just had to do enough to keep their faith. And there are various stories related to how they even just prayed just without any movement or basic movements, and they got rid of any signs of faith, but they wanted to maintain their faith. Of course, many others they moved over to Morocco and other countries thereafter. The second thing that we can learn from this is that Allah will always protect His people, those who have faith, those who rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's help will come. So sometimes we may feel like Allah's help will not, and with the things that are going on, especially with the COVID-19 and so on, we may feel down, and this could really affect our mental health and well-being. So it's really, really important that we keep hope alive. And put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another important lesson that we learn from this, the power of dua. As soon as they enter, as soon as they take their precautions, as soon as they um, hide from their enemies, first thing they do is رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا, making dua, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. In life, we would always have two choices. One, the easy way, which might lead us to hell or might lead us to difficulties, or Allah's way, even if it seems difficulty. And sometimes we may have to make those kind of choices. I mean, Allah help us so that we, in our weak iman, don't have to make those kind of choices. But if it does, that we are prepared, just like the people of the cave. So with this, inshallah, I will leave it here. If there are any questions that you have or anybody want to raise anything, you can ask that question, inshallah. But for now, these are the key points that I wanted to make about the companions of the cave. Okay, inshallah. So I haven't got any other questions right now. Anything that normally comes up, I try and cover as we go along. But alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair to all those of you who have been able to join live, and those who are catching up later. Hope you have benefited from this session. Inshallah, in our next session, we not necessarily immediately after this next week, but on another time, for this Hounslow Inspire Circle, I will be able to join and cover the next story that we covered in Surah Al-Khaf, which is the men with the two gardens, inshallah. May Allah give us tawfiq to be people of Iman, people who are faithful to their aqidah and their way, and are able to, just like these companions of the cave, are able to pass through these kinds of tests and remain faithful, inshallah. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.